Zhang Zhidong, a top student from Peking University, was once a charismatic Spanish department speech champion by the shores of Wyoming Lake. Who would have thought that more than a decade after graduating and moving to Mexico, he would transform into Brother Wang, the king of fentanyl, courted by two of Latin America's biggest rival gangs? With his exceptional intelligence and social skills, he managed to open up a golden channel between Asian chemical factories and Mexican gambling networks. He handled $150 million in dirty money every year, and at the same time, used his Peking University alumni network and 150 shell companies to launder money seamlessly, leaving no trace. The most outrageous part is that in 2025, while under house arrest after being captured, he actually managed to escape by digging through a wall right under the noses of the military and police. He then took a private jet across the Atlantic, staging a dramatic international escape that shocked China, the US, Mexico, and Cuba. This isn't a movie, it's the real-life version of Breaking Bad. What kind of soul-crushing price and geopolitical games are hidden behind this top student's descent into darkness and double life? Hello everyone, this is Weiyu, Watching the World, and I'm Chen Weiyu. Today we're going to take you into the double life of Zhang Zhidong and see how this top student from Peking University step by step became a real-life Breaking Bad. In 1985, Zhang Zhidong was born into a scholarly family in Beijing. From a young age, Zhang Zhidong displayed intelligence and talent far beyond his peers. Not only did he excel academically, but more importantly, he possessed a natural gift for socializing and negotiation. During high school, he was admitted to the liberal arts class at the affiliated high school of Peking University. In this elite environment at Peking University's affiliated high school, Zhang Zhidong continued to stand out as a shining presence. In 2006, he experienced the first highlight of his life when he received an acceptance letter from Peking University's Spanish program. Peking University, how many Chinese students dream of studying there? At Peking University, Zhang Zhidong's performance was nothing short of outstanding. He excelled in his studies, was quick-witted, and could speak fluent, authentic Spanish. Back then, he was really popular. Zhang Zhidong's college classmate Alex, who later worked with him, recalled in a media interview that Zhang had a remarkable talent for negotiation and was extremely adaptable. No matter what kind of environment he was thrown into, he could quickly build strong relationships with the most important and influential people there. No one could have imagined that his remarkable negotiation skills and his ability to build relationships with key figures, these two outstanding qualities, would one day become his ticket to the gates of hell. In 2010, Zhang Zhidong graduated smoothly from Peking University. At that time, China was in the midst of an economic boom, and it was a golden era for both private and state-owned enterprises to expand abroad on a large scale, especially the rich mineral resources in Latin America, which attracted countless Chinese companies to invest there. As a top Peking University graduate, fluent in Spanish, and gifted in communication, Zhang Zhidong quickly got his first opportunity. In 2011, he left Beijing and boarded a flight to Mexico. At that time, she was full of hope, thinking she was about to explore a land brimming with business opportunities. But he had no idea that beneath the land of Mexico, covered in yellow sand and cacti, besides iron ore, there also flowed the world's bloodiest and most violent black gold. And he was step by step approaching that fateful crossroads from which there would be no turning back. After arriving in Mexico, Zhang Zhidong joined a Chinese-owned iron mining company as a translator and negotiation representative. The mining market in Mexico is extremely complicated. Not only do you have to deal with tedious government approvals, but more critically, many of the local mining areas are actually controlled by local armed groups or gangs. To mine iron ore here, a company must have exceptionally strong local coordination skills. At this point, Zhang Zhidong's strengths came into full play. Not only could he negotiate fluently in Spanish with local officials and union leaders, but he was also able to venture deep into desolate mining areas where even the police didn't dare to go, drinking and socializing with the local strongmen, forging close brotherly ties with them. With his assistance, the iron mining company's business flourished for a time. As a result, Zhang Zhidong rose steadily through the ranks, earning a generous salary and gaining a bit of fame within the local Chinese community. However, the good times didn't last. In 2013, the global commodities market slumped, and with tightening policies and worsening security in Mexico, the Chinese-owned iron mining company where Zhang Zhidong worked ultimately declared bankruptcy. After the company went bankrupt, the other Chinese employees either packed up and returned to China or went to other countries to look for opportunities. But Zhang Zhidong made a decision that would change his life. He decided to stay. However, staying in Mexico meant he no longer had a stable job or income, so how would he survive? We'll talk about that in detail in a moment. But first, let's take a short commercial break to thank our sponsor, Jeju Island Red Sea Cucumber Health Gel from Korea. Nowadays, wherever the Chinese Communist Party's influence reaches, their dark hand is there to suppress people. So for businesses that have the courage and sense of justice to support and sponsor our program, it truly takes tremendous bravery. Please make sure to support these conscientious companies as much as you can. Of course, the quality of their products is also truly excellent. The feedback and high repurchase rate from many viewers already speak for themselves. This Korean Jeju Island Red Sea Cucumber Health Gel is also one of our most popular products, and it often sells out. Why is it always in such high demand? First, it's made from wild red sea cucumbers hand-harvested by female divers on Jeju Island, South Korea, so the supply is very limited. Second, it's because of its high repurchase rate. It's just so high. Many viewers have their whole families eating it together. If you often feel tired, have trouble sleeping, or lack energy, that's usually a sign your body has been worn down over time. Red sea cucumber is rich in saponins, polysaccharides, and collagen, which can help our bodies gradually restore vitality. We can show everyone some feedback from viewers. Some people say it definitely improves sleep. They take one stick every night and sleep soundly until morning. Others share that they fall asleep as soon as they get into bed, have smooth bowel movements morning and night, and even knee pain and fatty liver have improved. Some viewers even said that after just 1 month, their leg cramps that have lasted for 20 years were gone. Of course, all of these are individual experiences, and results may vary from person to person. What we want to remind everyone here is that this Red Sea Cucumber Health Gel is a high-quality health supplement. It's not a medicine, so if you need it, you can really give it a try. Click the link below our program and enter my promo code WEWOO to enjoy a 15% discount. Alright, back to the main topic. What did Zhang Zhidong do while staying in Mexico? At first, he took on some odd translation and consulting jobs, but since he was used to a high salary and a comfortable lifestyle, he quickly felt a huge financial gap. At this moment, the devil came knocking at his door. Because he had spent a long time dealing with various local powers in the mining areas, Zhang Zhidong happened to meet a mid-level leader of a local drug cartel. At a gathering, this drug dealer was deeply impressed by Zhang Zhidong's fluent Spanish, sharp business acumen, and his thorough understanding of the logistics and trade processes between China and Mexico. He was truly shocked. The drug dealer realized that this bespectacled, refined-looking young Chinese man in front of him was truly a rare business genius. So this cartel leader threw out an offer to Zhang Zhidong that he simply couldn't refuse. Come work for us and take charge of logistics management. I'll pay you $50,000 a month, $50,000 every month. For him, that was an astronomical figure. From that day on, he set foot on the path of drug trafficking. But how could a Chinese translator who had just entered the business so quickly break into the inner circle of Lami's most ruthless Greek Roya cartel and even make those Mexican drug lords who treat human life like it's nothing listen to his every word? Behind all this, there's an even deeper and darker secret. Mexico's drug trade has undergone dramatic changes over the past few decades. In the past, the cartels mainly smuggled drugs like cocaine and marijuana, which required vast amounts of land for cultivation and complicated cross-border transportation. But around 2015, a new type of synthetic chemical drug completely changed the rules of the game. This is fentanyl. Fentanyl is 50 times more potent than *****, and just a tiny dose can be lethal. What's even more important is that it's chemically synthesized. There's no need for cultivation, just raw materials, and it can be mass-produced in underground labs within a few days. And the most crucial precursor chemicals for making fentanyl mostly come from China. The The Mexican cartels have the technology, the channels, and the market, but they're missing one thing: a stable supply chain for chemical raw materials, as well as intermediaries who can communicate seamlessly with Chinese chemical factories and understand international trade, tax evasion, and covert logistics. This was practically a stage tailor-made for Zhang Zhidong. Zhang Zhidong keenly spotted this huge business opportunity. He was no longer satisfied with just earning a fixed salary of $50,000 a month. He became the irreplaceable top intermediary in this chain. Using his network as a Chinese national, he started connecting with some domestic chemical manufacturers and traders, establishing contacts. In the eyes of those chemical factories, Zhang Zhidong was a reliable client engaged in legitimate chemical trade in Latin America. But to the Mexican cartels, Zhang Zhidong was a powerful figure who could get them direct access to the source. According to later indictments disclosed by U.S. courts, Zhang Zhidong's operating model was extremely professional and efficient, and also highly covert. He used domestic chemical networks to disguise tons of precursor chemicals as ordinary industrial raw materials, cosmetic ingredients, or cleaning agents, and shipped them legally by sea or air to ports in Mexico. After the goods arrived in Mexico, Zhang Zhidong then used his local network to safely distribute these chemicals to underground drug labs run by groups like the Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation cartels. Here's a detail that shows just how formidable Zhang Zhidong's methods were. In Mexico, the Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation cartels are mortal enemies. They absolutely cannot coexist. They often engage in shootouts right on the streets and behead their rivals to make a public example. Any local who dares to play both sides will definitely end up hacked to pieces. But Zhang Zhidong was able to become an honored guest of both of these major groups at the same time. He moved between these two giants, and not only did he avoid any danger to his life, he actually became the god of wealth that both sides had to go out of their way to please and protect. How did he manage that? Besides his exceptional negotiation skills and his irreplaceable advantage in raw materials, what other backing did he have? Within the inner circles of the Mexican and Qatari cartels, those ruthless drug lords who normally wouldn't bat an eye at killing someone would privately address him respectfully as the king, or affectionately call him Brother Wang. When recalling the events later, a senior member of a Mexican drug cartel still spoke with a hint of reverence in his voice. He was an extremely important person. He was the best. He built the entire supply chain for us. If he cut us off, we would have to rebuild all our routes from scratch. In just a few short years, Zhang Zhidong's illegal profits from handling drugs exceeded $150 million annually. He smuggled and distributed over 1,000 kilograms of oxycodone, 1,800 kilograms of fentanyl, and 600 kilograms of methamphetamine. He married a local Mexican woman and successfully obtained Mexican citizenship. He bought luxury homes in Latin America, traveled everywhere with bodyguards, and fully completed his transformation from a young man out of a Beijing hutong known as Little Zhang to the dark path of becoming Brother Wang, a transnational gambling kingpin. But after making so much blood-stained, dirty money, how could he possibly launder it without anyone noticing? Zhang Zhidong smiled slightly, once again showing off the high IQ criminal talent of a top Peking University graduate. And this time, he even reached his hand into his own alumni circle. $150 million. That's not an amount you can just casually deposit in a bank or carry around in a suitcase. The financial regulations in the United States and Mexico are extremely strict. Any large, unexplained movement of funds will immediately trigger anti-money laundering alerts. To get around this, Zhang Zhidong registered 150 shell companies all at once across countries like the US, Europe, China, and Japan. On the surface, these companies dealt in clothing, electronics, cosmetics, and even import-export trade. But in reality, every single one of them was a money laundering machine serving drug money. And Zhang Zhidong's very first attempt at money laundering actually started with his Peking University alumni WeChat group. Around 2015, which was right when Zhang Zhidong had just joined the drug trafficking organization and started handling dirty money, his college classmate Alex noticed that Zhang, who used to rarely speak in the group, suddenly became unusually active. He frequently posted messages like this in the Peking University Spanish Department alumni group. "Hey old classmates, does anyone have RMB they need to exchange for US dollars, or US dollars they want to exchange for RMB? I have a way to help." He could offer exchange rates much better than the banks, and if anyone needed it, they could message him privately at any time. Back then, everyone thought Zhang Zhidong was doing import-export business in Mexico and needed foreign currency for his work. Plus, since they were all classmates and friends, there was a high level of trust. Quite a few people actually did exchanges with him. It wasn't until years later, when the news broke, that everyone suddenly realized they had actually become accomplices in Zhang Zhidong's money laundering operation for Mexican drug lords. Zhang Zhidong used this kind of mirror transaction and underground banking system to process the cash earned from selling fentanyl in the U.S., circulating the U.S. dollars in Mexico and the U.S. Then, through accounts in China, he would pay the equivalent amount in RMB to domestic suppliers of raw materials, or transfer it to accounts he designated. This method is known in the financial world as invisible money laundering. There are no records of cross-border fund transfers, no bank fees, and even the regulatory authorities of both countries find it hard to trace. With this seamless money laundering system and a stable supply chain for chemicals, Zhang Zhidong enjoyed his luxurious life behind the scenes in peace. But he forgot one thing: the net of justice is vast and nothing escapes it. When tons of fentanyl started flooding into the United States like a tidal wave, as hundreds or even thousands of young Americans were losing their lives every day, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration and the FBI had already set their sights on this so-called clever Mr. Wang. At the same time, the covert battle between China and the United States over the fentanyl issue had reached a fever pitch. In China, fentanyl precursor chemicals are classified by law as strictly controlled substances used for illicit drug production. For an ordinary company to export just 1 kilogram of these raw materials, they must go through layer upon layer of approvals from the police, customs, the Ministry of Commerce, and more. So many that it's almost suffocating. So here's the question. Zhang Zhidong wasn't dealing with just a few kilograms, but with tons, even up to a dozen tons at a time. Illicit drug precursor chemicals. So how exactly are these strictly controlled materials swaggering through Chinese customs, loaded onto cargo ships, and continuously shipped to Mexico? If you're sharp, you must realize that behind all this is the tacit approval at the national level by the Chinese Communist Party and even policy support. The U.S. Congress once released a major investigative report that exposed a shocking truth. The Chinese government has been providing value-added tax export rebates to Chinese chemical companies that sell fentanyl precursor materials overseas, with subsidies reaching up to 13%. So what does this mean? It means that as long as your chemical materials are sold to foreigners, especially to the Americas, to Mexican cartels, not only does the Chinese Communist Party not investigate, but they even use state funds to give you a bonus to encourage your exports. The massive Chinese chemical supply chain behind Zhang Zhidong is running at full speed thanks to this national-level green channel. This is a new kind of opium war, one without the smoke of gunpowder. Back then, the West used opium to undermine the foundations of the late Qing Empire. Today, the Chinese Communist Party tacitly allows and even encourages white gloves like Zhang Zhidong to continuously ship fentanyl to the United States, destroying American grassroots communities and its younger generation. Not only that, the reason Zhang Zhidong was able to launder massive amounts of money without a trace using 150 shell companies is also closely tied to the same channels used by Red Capital fleeing China under the CCP. In recent years, investigations by the U.S. Department of Justice and the DEA have shown that local money laundering groups in Latin America have been completely defeated by China's underground money laundering networks. These Chinese money laundering organizations are able to operate without leaving a trace because, on one end, there are red elites and corrupt officials eager to move their assets and exchange RMB for US dollars. On the other end, there are plenty of Latin American drug lords with large amounts of US cash that needs to be laundered. The two sides hit it off immediately. The CCP's regulatory authorities are fully aware of this, yet they turn a blind eye and let it happen. Because this not only allows domestic elites to move their assets, but also deals a heavy blow to the United States in terms of finance and social order. And Zhang Zhidong is precisely the perfect link between this red money laundering black hole and the Mexican cartels. However, once the Trump administration in the United States realized that the real opponent in the fentanyl shadow war was Zhang Zhidong of the Chinese Communist Party, he, as the middleman, became a key figure targeted by the FBI and the DEA. In late October 2024, in an upscale residential area of Mexico City, several unmarked black SUVs suddenly sped in. A large number of heavily armed Mexican special police and federal agents quickly surrounded a villa. When the bedroom door was kicked open, Zhang Zhidong, who was still asleep, didn't even have time to react before his hands were tightly cuffed with cold handcuffs. This time, it was a top-secret joint operation between the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration and the Mexican police. The U.S. side had already submitted a thick indictment and extradition request to the Mexican government, accusing Zhang Zhidong of multiple serious crimes, including conspiracy to import fentanyl, money laundering, and involvement in organized crime. However, just when everyone thought the legendary story of the Peking University drug king was about to end in court, fate took another 180-degree turn. Mexico's judicial system has always been notorious for its corruption and inefficiency. The cartel's influence had already infiltrated every corner of the courts. After Zhang Zhidong was arrested, he was held in Mexico's highest security prison. However, in the middle of 2025, a local Mexican judge made a ruling that shocked everyone and was extremely controversial. Citing health reasons and procedural flaws, the judge allowed Zhang Zhidong to be released from the high-security prison. He was placed under house arrest instead. As soon as this ruling was announced, public opinion was in an uproar, and the U.S. government issued a strong protest. Even Claudia Sheinbaum, the newly inaugurated female president of Mexico at the time, made a rare public condemnation of the judge, calling it a blatant betrayal of the nation's judicial credibility and the fight against drug crimes. However, no matter how angry the authorities were, the ruling had already taken effect, and Zhang Zhidong was sent back to a villa in the suburbs of Mexico City. Outside the door, heavily armed Mexican military police stood guard around the clock. In the eyes of the judge and the guards, this gentle and frail Chinese scholar had absolutely no chance of escaping under such tight surveillance. However, they clearly underestimated just how terrifying Wang Yi's survival skills and determination to escape were. After all, he was someone who could call the shots among the most ruthless cartels in Latin America. Even more so, they underestimated the silent tug-of-war behind the scenes between the Chinese Communist Party and the United States over this man. On the night of July 11, 2025, the outskirts of Mexico City were silent. The military police stationed outside Zhang Zhidong's villa were, as usual, smoking and chatting, keeping an eye on the light that stayed on all night in a second-floor room of the villa. They thought Zhang Zhidong was anxiously waiting in his bedroom for the extradition verdict. But inside the villa at that moment, a real-life version of the Shawshank Redemption was unfolding. Zhang Zhidong, using tools he had secretly prepared in advance, managed to carve out a hole just big enough for a person to squeeze through in one of the bedroom's load-bearing walls. The other end of this hole led directly to a blind spot behind the villa, out of sight of the military police surveillance. Under the cover of night, Zhang Zhidong, dressed all in black, silently crawled out through the hole. And outside the villa, a cartel-arranged SUV had already been waiting for him, its engine quietly idling. When the military police on the morning shift knocked on the door the next day and got no response, they broke in. All that was left in the bedroom was the gaping hole in the wall and bricks and rubble scattered all over the floor. Wang has escaped from prison. This is a race against time, a covert battle to seize him. The United States is eager to extradite him because he is a key living witness who exposed the Chinese Communist Party's unrestricted warfare with fentanyl. Meanwhile, the Red forces behind him are desperately trying to help him escape, even willing to silence him for good or get him out safely before the extradition. Because if Zhang Zhidong speaks in a U.S. court, if he reveals which domestic officials, which chemical factories, and which military-linked enterprises have been giving him the green light, it would be a devastating diplomatic and political blow to the Chinese Communist Party. After breaking out of prison, Zhang Zhidong knew very well that there was no longer any place for him to hide in the U.S. His only goal was to seek refuge with the CCP's ally, Russia. Zhang Zhidong quickly used his connections to board a private business jet that had long been prepared for him at a private airport in Mexico. The plane carried him across the Atlantic and landed in Havana, Cuba for a layover. After that, he headed straight for the Russian border. Zhang Zhidong thought that as long as he set foot on Russian soil, with the unconventional warfare secrets he possessed and his delicate ties with Beijing, he would be able to secure asylum. However, fate played a deadly trick on him at the most critical moment. When he tried to enter Russia with what he thought was a flawless forged passport, the Russian border officials saw through his disguise at a glance after conducting biometric checks and system comparisons. Given the delicate international situation at the time, Russia was unwilling to completely fall out with the United States over this drug trafficker, so they denied him entry on the spot. From this incident, you can also see that the relationship between Russia, China, and the United States is subtly shifting. Putin is not truly tied to Xi Jinping. For Zhang Zhidong, Russia's refusal to let him enter was like a bolt from the blue. With no way out, he had no choice but to turn back and fly again to his transit point, Havana, Cuba. On July 31, 2025, when Zhang Zhidong, exhausted, landed at Havana Airport in Cuba, what awaited him was the cold muzzle of the Cuban security forces' guns. The Cuban government was also unwilling to offend the United States over an international drug lord like him. After a brief political standoff with the U.S. and Mexico, they decided to deport him back to Mexico. This time, the political protection he once relied on was completely gone, and China would not step in to shield him. At this point, China would choose to distance itself from him, and the Chinese Communist Party would firmly deny that anything he did was connected to the Chinese government. On October 23, 2025, under heavy guard, Zhang Zhidong was put on a plane bound for the United States, officially being extradited to the U.S. to stand trial. In the New York federal court, when Zhang Zhidong appeared in court wearing prison clothes and shackled in handcuffs and leg irons, the then U.S. Deputy Attorney General Todd Brancy looked at the judge and spoke in an extremely serious tone. Your Honor, standing before you is one of the most threatening and dangerous drug traffickers in the world. He has used his intelligence and chemical materials to cause countless deaths on American soil. Although Zhang Zhidong currently denies all charges in court, what likely awaits him is life imprisonment in one of the highest security prisons in the United States. And regardless of whether the Chinese Communist Party behind him admits it or not, the CCP's global reach is being cut off. All right, that's all for today's program. If you enjoyed our content, please don't forget to give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and share it with more people. I'm Wei Yu. See you in the next episode.